Welcome back in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by the legendary Les Bowen. Les, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you on this Tuesday.
Good to be here, fellas. How are you?
Good to see you, Les. I'm thrilled to have you because I love unfiltered Les Bowen. I've seen you on X, and I want to start with Nick Sirianni. You're not happy with Nick now. Where do you start with Nick Sirianni?
Well, the emotionalism, I guess, is where I would start. It's a cliche in football. I've said this before about, never get too high, never get too low. And everybody says it, and even Nick says it. But if you watch Nick, he doesn't live it. I mean, after that game, he was just a basket case, sort of. I guess he was excited.
That's what I said. He was so over the top after the game.
He was almost adversity. And then yesterday, he declares that he's not going to answer questions anymore about why he went for it on a particular fourth down, that he's always doing it for the best interests of the team. Well, that's not helpful. And
we kind of know that he's trying.
What he was trying to dodge, and Jeff McClain did a very good job of getting him to eventually sort of give his rationale. The only one that people really care about is the one right before halftime, because that was just so ridiculous. The idea that you were going to pick up a
first down. There's no upside to it. Even if you get
pick up a first down, call timeout, and run 2 plays before kicking a field goal with about 10 seconds left. That's fantasy world. That's just so ridiculous.
My thought on
that it's ridiculous, and he just doesn't. He's decided he's not going to talk about it anymore.
Well, my thought on
carried away in the moment, and he can't explain that.
My thought on the 4th and 1 is you're trying to surprise them. Obviously, you got the tush push look, and you run the sweep off that, and you're trying to surprise them. And to my thought process, you're trying to surprise them to get a touchdown because it's irrelevant if you don't, essentially, as you pointed out, because then you got to burn the timeout. And if it's a decent run, you probably got time for one play, if that, maybe not even that.
Assuming that, you don't get sacked, you don't have a fumble snap, you don't, and
all the bad stuff
knows what you have to do. They know that you have to throw it to the end zone. They know that you can't run it at all. You're 10 yards away from the end zone, so they could just back everybody off. I mean, even if you give the quarterback 6 or 7 yards there, by the time he runs that distance and gets tackled, the half's over. You're not going to be able to line up and spike or anything like that.
Yeah, that was just a goofy decision.
Yeah.
But I think lost in the goofiness of the decision was he said it was his play call.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, this opens a Pandora's box that didn't need to be open and shouldn't have been open from the Eagles' perspective. I mean, I don't care, but he opened this Pandora's box to the point where now it's all right. Did Kellen make that call? Did Nick make that call? Vice versa. You're going to have that going back and forth all season.
Yeah, he says he sometimes calls plays now,
which new.
Was not the understanding that we had before yesterday. So
completely new. Yeah, from my perspective, Les, I was under the assumption that he had not called a play since week 9 of the 2021 season. That's what he tells me. And I took him at his word. And now all of a sudden, sometimes I'll call a play.
Yeah.
Sometimes Kevin Patullo will call a play. Now, what I think he meant, but he didn't explain, is look, in the game planning process, maybe Kevin Patullo comes up with a play and Kellen Moore says, that's a good idea. And they got the big chart, and on 4th and 1, they're going to run this play. If it comes up, they're going to run this play, and that was a Nick play or that's what I think he meant. But that's not how it came across.
No. And it sets up his critics so well.
Oh, yeah.
Because anytime they run a stupid looking play, they can say, well, Nick must have Nick must have overruled Kellen on that one, you know.
Anytime there's a bubble screen, Les, that goes
Yeah.
for -2, oh, that's a Nick play.
Yeah.
Sets up his critics beautifully. You couldn't have set them up. You couldn't have served it up better. That's like a batting practice pitcher in a home run derby. That's served up to his critics. Yeah.
But my bigger problem with Nick is, so he goes on this rant after the game about he evokes his son's baseball coach, Coach Dan.
Coach Dan, in your neck of the woods, by the
How
way.
that this is really, at Haddonfield, this is really Coach Dan's a great coach because when the kids make a mistake, his thing is, well, okay, now what? You know, like, what are you going to do next? You know, that's behind you. You have to focus on what's – yes, that's a very good mindset to have, especially with children. When you're talking about professional athletes who are making millions and millions of dollars, I would like to see more of a focus on doing it right. You know, he conflates adversity.
A drop pass is not adversity.
Johnson going out is adversity. You know, Devontae Smith going out is adversity. You shooting yourself in the foot,
not adversity,
and limping to the finish line isn't adversity. That's just stupidity. You know, you can't. You have to be focused on doing it right, and yeah, you want people to bounce back from mistakes, but that's not all that's important, and that's what he seems to be. You know, to me, that's what I hear.
It was so over the top, Les. It's adversity. He's comparing it to life. There's adversity, and you go through shit in life. He said, "I mean, what are you talking about, dude? If you're dropping a pass, ain't adversity. It's a drop pass."
Yeah, that scoreless first half was not, you know, a courageous attempt to overcome adversity. It was just stupidity piled upon stupidity, turnovers, penalties, bad decisions. You know, that's not really adversity to me. That's just screwing yourself over.
You know, this goes back to Doug Peterson era. And Doug's not having a great time in Jacksonville, but this us versus them mentality, it's like the only card the Eagles have. Yeah. Like CJ thinks we're all, you know, out to get him. It's all they have. At one point when you change up the messaging, I don't know. It bothers me, but I'm with you. Maybe the shelf life is coming to an end, but we'll see. You mentioned millions of dollars, Les. How do you pay $51 million to an edge rusher?
Where you were going with this, yes.
Yeah. $51 million to an edge rusher. Now, Vic Fangio is the only defensive coordinator in the world, I'm convinced, that would not play this guy.
Yeah.
Because certainly Sean Desai would have to play him. Even Jonathan Gannon would have to play him. Vic's like, he can't play, I'm not playing him.
Yeah.
But that's a problem.
It is, and it's remarkable to me. So the defense, I'm glad you brought this up because I don't want to sound completely negative toward the Eagles. The defense did a remarkable, astounding turnaround Sunday. Really made me look like an idiot. I had written for PHLY about Vic Fangio says this is fixable and that's fixable, and I just don't see it. Well, you know, shows how much I know. The defense was extraordinary. So many guys, you know, really, really played well. The only defensive player that you could say didn't do anything better was Bryce Huff. In the game where the whole defense comes together and puts together this incredible game, one of the best defensive games given the opponent and what it had done in the first two games. You know, one of the best defensive efforts I think I've seen from an Eagles team. And Bryce Huff is the one guy who has no part in it whatsoever. I mean, you're right. Vic didn't play him a lot, but he did play him. Yeah. And he did nothing with the snaps that he had. He was, I can't remember seeing him on the field.
He was the third man on the Carr interception. It was Brandon first. It was Jalen Carter was there. And then here came zero. I said I had to double look check. Yeah. He was in the area, at least, on what turned out to be Reed Blankenship's interception that sealed the deal. That's the closest I think he got to making a play. By the way, how good is BG, man? That
I
dude
was
was
just going to
amazing.
say, what I'm worried about here is, BG is not young anymore.
No, he's not.
I think he played more Sunday night than he was playing during the Super Bowl season. I mean, can he keep this? I hope he can. He's playing very, very well, and I wouldn't be shocked if he does play 17 games at this level, which I think is going to be very, very, very difficult. But if he does he really want to retire?
Agreed, Les. 100%.
He already brought it up. He started bringing it up because
It's
Vic
not
loves
like
him.
they have a host of successors on hand.
You're spot on. I mean, I said it. I'm like, look, I'm about to start the campaign for BG to return next year if he keeps this up. He looks tremendous at 36 years old.
And by the way, we as reporters need BG because he stands there every Wednesday, first guy, accountable, win, lose, no matter what. And everybody else is hiding during the week of adversity.
Yeah, I don't think anybody got a lot of great quotes out of Bryce Huff after Sunday's game. I didn't see them.
You never get a good. Bryce has been accountable. He'll talk, but and he's professional. He never says a lot, but at least he does show up, and he is. It's got to be difficult for him. I'm sure he's losing confidence. It's evident. Vic is great, as you mentioned. He's a great coach, Les. He can turn around things in a week, and you think, and I wouldn't have blamed you for what you wrote at PHLY. It looked like a disaster. And this defense was not looking good. And all of a sudden, he tweaks a couple things, and he's got people going in the right direction. But there's some bad to Vic Fangio in that, and you saw it in Miami. Some players loved him. Some players didn't love him. And it seems like if he writes you off, he's going to write you off. And
he's kind of, it's kind of with that kind of a coach, the fact that he loves 36-year-old Brandon Graham and doesn't really love the young guys that's kind of the way that often goes with a coach like that.
Guys
if
who know
you're
how to
really
play.
bent on developing a lot of young guys, I don't know that he's your guy. There's a little bit of Jim Washburn-ish,
but then you got Quinion. Quinion is taking to it.
That's very true. Yeah. But with the defense, though, even if they had lost that game, I was going to say that my perception of the team changed for the better in that after the Atlanta game, I was seriously thinking they just don't have the defense to contend. They don't have what it takes to be a serious team. And Sunday proved that they do. Now, maybe they won't be able to use that 5-man front as effectively against other teams, maybe, this or that, but there's talent there and a defensive coordinator who knows how to make adjustments. And, I think they're back on track as far as being a serious contender in a flawed NFC where nobody, the Vikings are the best team in the league, apparently.
It's the Vikings and Seahawks. You got to have an ex-Jets quarterback. It's the Vikings and the Seahawks. Sam Darnold, Geno Smith. But, I mean, it's – I think it's in a lot of ways it's better after what the Eagles went through last season, 10-1, and then they collapse versus maybe they're going to have some growing pains, but they get better as the season goes on. And I think the NFC East is weak enough to, they're going to make the playoffs almost, barring significant attrition. And they have time to sort of grow and learn, and maybe they're playing their best football late. And then it's like, who knows?
Which is better than playing it early, as we've seen. Washington looked awful good last night.
Yes, they did.
Certainly have a quarterback. Now they all have to do is get him injured toward the end of the regular season and then force him to play in a playoff game that will seriously mess up his leg for the rest of his life.
People
But,
forget how good RG3 was his
yeah,
rookie
he
season.
was good. That was not a mirage, and they
Yeah.
screwed it up totally. But, Jaden Daniels is for real, and, the new ownership there, it's sooner
Better
or
than
later.
Daniel Snyder. Sixers fans might not like it, but Josh Harris is a
Compared to
hell of a lot
Daniel
better.
Snyder,
Yeah.
Josh Harris is gold. It's so eventually I think the Commanders are going to be serious. The Giants continue not to be serious for the last decade, and Dallas is the circus as it always is. And I really wonder about Jerry Jones and some of the things he's saying now. He's not a young man.
No, he is
And
not.
this is really kind of deteriorating a little bit when he talks about how they couldn't have afforded Derrick Henry.
What does that even mean? He just said, but he admitted, and again, at his age, you don't know. And I hope everything's okay
Yeah,
from
me
that
too.
perspective. But he admitted basically in the offseason, like he does this on purpose because he wants to keep the Cowboys on the back page. Not that anybody reads sports sections anymore, but he wants to keep
on
them in the headlines.
ESPN or on
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
they're always he's always
Digital
saying something outrageous.
PHLY digital
Yeah.
sites. We'll give the
Yeah.
love to Les Bowen. Read them there. But he wants to be in the forefront. He wants to be the headliner, and he does it purposefully, which I kind of believe. I don't agree with it. I don't think it helps the Cowboys win. But ultimately, whether it's Dak Prescott, CD Lamb, Micah Parsons, he goes this entire way and he pays them at the end. And he always does it. And he pays them more, whereas the Eagles are proactive, save a bunch of money, and maybe they can do some other things to build up their roster.
Yeah.
So clearly, I think the Eagles have the better way of doing business. But
I actually think Dallas often drafts better than the Eagles.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, Dallas drafts well.
The edge the Eagles have is they understand the business of football. Jerry understands it from a standpoint of making money off of it, but he doesn't understand how to use the cap and how to operate in the modern system at all. And nobody seems to be able to explain it to him. He had this quote back in the summer about wanting to see all the cards before he made a decision, wanting to see what the other contracts were, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to do. I guess he's scared of giving somebody an outlier contract like he did for Ezekiel Elliott years and years ago, that he's going to get caught ahead of the market or something. But that's not a reasonable fear in these situations.
You're always going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
The Eagles may have made a mistake with Bryce Huff, but that's
Right.
not going to stop Howie Roseman from being proactive with whomever he wants to extend next.
And down in Dallas, people pointed out right away how different ways they could have afforded Derrick Henry. It's not like Derrick Henry is making $50 million a year or anything. He's a running back. They very well could have figured out a way to afford Derrick Henry. They just didn't. But again, Eagles fans should be thankful that Jerry doesn't quite understand how these things work.
Yeah, it's true. Les, I want to ask you your opinion on the offense through 3 weeks here, namely Jalen Hurts. Lots have been made of the turnovers, some bad decisions, but just your level of concern or not concern about Jalen Hurts after 3 weeks of the 2024 season.
Zander, it's really weird to me. I mean, if you took away those 2 early turnovers, he played a tremendous game Sunday. There were a few times where, the analyst said, oh, gee, he had somebody open and he went to the other guy. But that happens. That doesn't, unless it happens 20 times a game or unless you lose and he could have, hit somebody for a touchdown, that matters then. But as long as he's completing 70-some% of his passes, it doesn't matter that much if he sees one guy instead of another guy. But the turnovers, it's just become very, very concerning. The first one, I know it had to do with Devontae and the route. I still say, and I got a lot of flack on this on social media. I still say if you're Jalen Hurts and you've got this giant pile of turnovers sitting on your shoulders, and you're in this situation, you're in the red zone, you're throwing into the end zone, maybe err on the side of caution. Maybe, your guy's being covered by Honey Badger, who's very, very good at exactly what he did there. Maybe you only throw to people who are wide open for a while in that situation, because you got to get this behind you. You can't every week say, well, we've got to cut out the turnovers. And then the next week, well, this isn't sustainable. And then the week after that, no, we really got to cut out the turnovers, because before long it becomes meaningless. And, even if it was Devontae's fault, you just can't, you need to be thinking about the downside. And the fumble was just extraordinarily stupid. It was Wentzian.
The fumble.
It was
exactly what I said, Les. It was very Wentzy.
He goes back there and he stands for several seconds, which he's still the only Eagles quarterback I've ever covered, I think, who can stand back there that long and not find a receiver. Now, I don't know whether these guys are terrible at the scramble drill or what the thing is, but usually if you give a guy like 5 seconds standing there, looking downfield, not running for his life, just, standing there looking downfield, he'll find somebody. But Jalen often doesn't. And then
when your heart sinks when it's Aaron Rodgers. You know what's coming.
Every second that goes by puts you in further danger with a lot of quarterbacks, but not so much with Jalen. So then he takes off at a point where blocks are breaking down. Nobody can hold a block for that long. So you've got to be aware of what's around you. And he takes off with the ball in one hand, just sort of like throwing out to his left, That's just incomprehensible to me. I don't understand it, especially when you turn the ball over on the previous series. You can't have that kind of goldfish memory of things like that. You just can't pretend like nothing has happened and you're starting fresh. You need to take care of the ball. That was 6 points off the board just on turnovers. And then another 6 points before halftime on fourth down decisions. It should have been such a more easy game. It was, to me, the real story of this game was that the Eagles dominated both lines of scrimmage.
Yeah. Jalen Carter. We haven't even talked about Jalen Carter. Yeah.
Which ought to be impossible. Their offensive line dominated the Saints defense. Their defensive line dominated the Saints offense. You've got to win decisively when that happens.
And you also had 480 yards to 220.
Yeah.
It's amazing the score was what it was.
But
and they were down to a 3rd and 16. With all that, they needed to convert a 3rd and 16 with the Saints
16,
playing Keystone Cops in the secondary.
Well, that was good. That was a good.
It was a good rub route, but typically rub routes don't cause 3 players to run.
And you really think a lot of teams on 3rd and 16 with Devontae and AJ not there are going to say, who can beat us here? Dallas Goedert. They might just leave Johnny Wilson wide open. The Saints didn't do it that way. But overall with Hurts, he's doing some really good things that I think are obscured by the mistakes. And it's a shame because it's not really, people are making parallels to Carson Wentz in 2020. And I just made one with the fumble. But that's all. Carson Wentz in 2020 was a basket case. He wasn't throwing the ball like this. He wasn't, completing 70% of his passes.
Right.
Hurts is doing some really good things. It's just he mixes it in with stuff that just makes you want to pull your hair out. And I don't know. Maybe it's just a matter of getting settled into this offense. That would be the best case scenario. I don't think you can really live with the level of turnovers, though, over a long period of time.
I agree with that. The overriding, I mean, they got to cut down the turnovers. Everybody knows it. I will say, because I gave him a pass on the interception, because I
Yeah.
do think, like, I had to get past, you could probably say twice a year, Les. That was to use Quinyon Mitchell, that was a trash route by Devontae Smith, which you never say. I mean, the guy's a tremendous route runner. So that's an outlier. And then I go to the coaching staff, because to me, that's an AJ Brown route. That's when you got the big bodied guy who's gonna that's an AJ Brown play. And it's like, oh, we don't have AJ. Let's use Devontae.
Let's
I'm
use the
like,
170-pound
yeah,
guy to muscle somebody out of
yeah.
the way. Yeah, yeah.
So I go to the coaching staff, and then maybe third, you go to Jalen, to your point, saying, all right, we've turned it over too much. Maybe I'll be a little bit more cautious. But boy, you got to trust your receivers. So I have a difficult time blaming them for that one. But the fumble, yeah, that's not acceptable. And it's bled in from last year to this year. So until the turnovers stop, I get why people are going to be hyper focused on Jalen Hurts, and certainly throwing interceptions in the end zone. But that one, I'm maybe I'm being too nice, but that one,
No,
I'm giving him a pass
that's a
on.
good point. It's a good point. At this point, any interception that he throws is going to – I mean, we all have interceptions like that. To me, the one at the end of the game against Atlanta was like – I didn't really – a lot of people were much harsher on that than I was. To me, he's got a guy right in his face. He's getting hit. He can't step into the throw. They're in a desperate situation. He's trying to find Devontae. It wasn't really a terrible throw, even after all that. And a guy who's a safety who's a very, very, very good player, made a great play. The answer there is to not be in a desperate situation with 34 seconds left, to not have your defense, just collapse like wet cardboard. There's some of the interceptions do have footnotes attached to them, but just the overall weight of it is unsustainable.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Les, your takeaways on Saquon Barkley and what he's been for the Eagles offense this year. He was the big offseason signing on the offensive side.
Yeah, I'm amazed. I thought he would help, but I didn't think he would be carrying. I didn't foresee the AJ Brown injury and all that stuff. He's carrying the load offensively. I don't think they're going to do this for 17 games.
I hope not, for his sake.
Right. But it's just been extraordinary. He always gets a yard or two more than I think he's going to get, when he gets hit. And that's so important. And he's just so good at finding that little bit of daylight that it's like Shady McCoy, really, only more powerful. I haven't seen anything like that from an Eagles runner since Shady McCoy. It's extraordinary, and I really think it was a great move to bring him here. And if they can ever get all the other stuff ironed out, that's a huge. They're really in with San Francisco and the top teams in terms of weapons. I think.
Boy, I don't know. San Francisco, everybody's hurt, Les. They might.
Yeah, they're finally having a post Super Bowl type season, and it won't surprise me if this just continues. Now Hargrave is out for the season.
Yeah, poor Marcus Epps out for the season. It was a bad day for ex-Eagles too. Marcus Epps, good guy.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Yeah, boy, that is amazing. It's and you mentioned Doug Peterson. That's a bad team, it looks like. And what happens when you've been there a while and your team is supposed to be
Doug's on the hot seat, man. Yeah. He's gotta figure something out down there. At Les Bowen, great to have Les. Read him at PHLY_sports. I do want to bring up AJ though before you get out of here. This guy, they're not the same team when he's not on the field. I mean, their offense, when he's on the field versus off the field, I've never seen anything like it from a receiver. But you think about Tyreek Hill, Kansas City, they played differently, but they won Super Bowls without the most explosive guy in the game. A couple of years ago, last year, the Vikings lost Justin Jefferson for, I don't know, 4 or 5 games. Jordan Addison stepped up, became a good rookie. The Eagles lose A.J. Brown, and it's like torture.
Yeah.
Why can't they persevere a little bit? You can't replace a player like that, but you got to be able to persevere a little bit better, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of, I'm not a great X and O expert, but I think it's a matter of choices. You saw what Dallas Goedert can do Sunday. They were reluctant. That Atlanta game, they just sort of, until the final stretch drive, they really didn't go to Dallas Goedert very much. They just figured Barkley and Smith were going to, somehow get them through this. They need to do a better job of looking at other ways to do it. You're right. They don't really adjust. You mentioned the pass to Devontae that was intercepted was an AJ Brown route. Maybe you just need to do some different stuff. And they just don't seem inclined to do that. They seem to want to try to do the same kinds of things without AJ Brown, and I don't think that's good. It's also worth saying that depth there at wide receiver has been a concern, and so you take away the main guy, and they are a different team, maybe more different than some other teams are in that situation. People keep talking about Jahan Dotson, but he hasn't been here long enough that I think he and Jalen have really a great connection yet or anything. Covey's hurt now, a long-term hurt, looks like. So you're going to have to see Wilson and some of these other guys, and you might need to go out and find another guy now for the short term. I don't know. But I just don't think they do a good job of adjusting their, you throw to the running backs more. Even though Saquon dropped that one pass, I think he's pretty good. That first touchdown he scored as an Eagle was a darn good catch. And I think you can certainly split him out wide and throw to him some. You can be a little more inventive with what you're doing.
We'll see if they do that. Les, thanks for joining the show today, man. Make sure you guys read Les's work at PHLY, one of the best to ever do it covering this team. Les, appreciate you joining today, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
Thanks, Les.
Bowen joining us on Birds 365. Great stuff from Les Bowen there, Johnny Mac. Always great to get his opinion in here. A very opinionated guy, Les Bowen is, and I love that's what you need when you bring a guest on. So good stuff from Les today.
Yeah, Les is great. And if you follow him on X, you know that. But yeah, I mean,
Twitter.
And it's hilarious because I thought the same. I thought Nick was so over the top after the game in New Orleans with the adversity, and I'm like, what adversities? We're in week 3 of the NFL season.
Yesterday, John.
Yeah, we're in week 3 of the NFL season. I mean, it was so over the top. I'm like, yeah, and it's not that big of a deal ultimately, but you know what? It is a big deal if you start that this early in the season and people wake up to it when you're trying to send your messaging. It's like, come on, dude. I mean, it's early. We'll figure it out.
John, do you find Nick Sirianni to be unlikable?
No, not at all. Very likable fellow. But people don't get to see him. They only see him on TV or whatever.
Right. The perception. There is a perception, not even just in Eagle land, but like, I guess it might be just a fan thing. It might not be the people in the know, but people think he's a kook. People think he's goofy as hell.
Well, I would say the same. If you met Nick for 5 minutes, he'd win you over. I
have met him. I have met Nick. The only thing I didn't like about Nick, John, when I met Nick was he gave me a soft ass handshake, and I hate a soft handshake.
Well, maybe he hurt his hand catching the football. You got to be like some of the guys you think. Like some of the offensive linemen hurt their hands, and you're expecting. I always tell the story of Jim Marshall for people that remember Jim Marshall. I met that guy when he was a senior citizen. He was at least 65, And he had the strongest handshake I have ever to this day. And I shook Adrian Peterson's hand, who was famous, and that was painful. But Jim Marshall was like a vice at 65 years old. And he was the guy who had the NFL record for consecutive games played for a very long time until I think Jeff Fiegels beat him, and ultimately Brett Favre beat him as a positional player. But my God, I can't even describe this guy's power, hand power. Jeff
There's a lot
Stoutland
of
was
that
just
man,
talking about,
Johnny Mac. That's why I didn't like it from Nick.
yeah. Well, maybe he hurt his. He's a receiver. Maybe he hurt his hand. A lot of the guys hurt their hands, and you're expecting the big handshake. Like Brett Stoutland told me he's got the strongest hands in the world, and so I want to test that out. But yeah, a lot of them hurt their hands, and it's not what you expect. And they got to fish you.
Yeah, I could see why people like Nick though when they meet. He's a genuine guy. He looks you in the eye, talks.
Yeah, he'd win you over. I said the same thing about Gannon. They all hated Gannon. Gannon would win you over in 2 minutes. Yeah, part of being a coach and being a leader is you're good with people. So if you get people in one-on-one situations, generally they're good with people. Now there's also the old school route, the Belichick's and the
Yeah, right.
But yeah, Nick's very good with people.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Just your final thoughts today, man. We're about to give away the Saquon Barkley jersey. I'm going to let you drop off.
Good luck, everybody. Good luck. Coordinators speak today, so we'll get to talk to Vic about the big bounce back. Kellen, I'm sure the play calling is going to come up. I'm sure he's been prepped for that. I don't know how much we'll learn because he's a very political guy, but
yeah, probably not much. Wait, so Vic speaks today?
Yeah, Vic speaks today. And Michael Clay will hear about the blocked punt, I assume.
Which looked like it was on Nolan Smith to me.
Yeah, it was Nolan.
Yeah.
We'll see. And new punt returner, probably going to be Cooper DeJean, but we'll see if anybody else is involved because Britton's going to be out for a while.
Who else was doing it in camp? It was like Isaiah Rodgers, wasn't it?
He did a couple, right? He was more of a kick returner than a punt
and then
returner.
Anias Smith did punts, right?
Anias did. Paris Campbell did at times. They have Danny Gray doing it now. He's a practice squad receiver, so maybe he's a wild card. He's a third-round pick of the 49ers. The Eagles keep picking up failed third-round picks of the 49ers and seeing if they can reclamate them. So Danny Gray, keep an eye on him as well.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. John, great show today, man. We'll talk to you again tomorrow on Birds 365. Looking forward to doing that. So, John, good stuff, man. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good luck on the Saquon jersey.
Yes, sir. Doing that now. See you, Johnny Mac. Catch you tomorrow, man. There's John McMullen on Birds 365. Great show today, everybody. We are now